Okay, about our great speakers, I'm going to name them as they are listed in our program. We have Alla Bakina with us, National Payment System Department from the Bank of Russia, Director of that department, Oleg Krylov, President and Chairperson of the Management Board of ROSINKAS, Georgy Luntovskiy, President and Association of Banks of Russia, Arkady Trachuk, Goznak, Director General, Alexey Ponomarenko, Senior Manager Director from the Cash Circulation Management Center of Sberbank, and Alexander Agakov, to the left of me, Chief Executive Officer or Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Payment Services QIWI. We'll also give the floor to our distinguished experts, in particular Vladimir Demidenko, Deputy Head of the Cash Circulation of Bank of Russia, Elena Tishakova, Director of the Department of Corporate Finances and Treasury from Ozon, a group of companies, Ralph Litzke, Ralph is over there. Ralph is the Director General of Lomo, and Mikhail Gerfunkel, from Glory Global Solutions Rus, and Sergei Barsukov, President of Prof Industry. I am to moderate this session. My name is Alexander Grizov. What can I say without praising myself too much? Yes, this whole session is about the future situation where we will be going in this dialogue between two main trends: cashless economy and circulation of cash. I will try to be as objective as possible. Even though I came to this business in 1991, and before that I had been deputy head of the Department of Credit Cards of Credo Bank, the first bank that issued the first Visa card here in Russia. But still there are other assessments in the world. For example, when Lenin called Leo Tolstoy the mirror of the revolution, in our magazine and in our online forums, we're trying to be as objective as possible. I was asked to begin with to try to give an objective overview of the situation with international experience from Germany to Japan and from Singapore to Sweden. That was a good idea, but what we have here, let's start with our Swedish friends. They are ahead of everyone else in this business. They are moving towards totally cashless society, but we all know that the most difficult, almost impossible part of the project, most costly part of the project, is covering that proverbial last mile, final mile. And according to the materials we read from the Swedish media, they are quoting some interesting figures and with all the positive reports of the Swedish Central Bank, where they show the reduction of their circulation of cash like this, they, at the same time, they also talk about the fact that the Bank and its leadership is concerned with a potential assessment of the situation that might occur in case of a disruption of the cashless circulation. That can lead to the disruption of the entire economy and complete chaos in payments. Will it happen or not? That's up to analysts to assess. And one of the topics that I think all of us, including speakers and our experts and delegates, are about to consider, given our brief session of 60 minutes, we need to discuss how it's going to look in reality. My second point, among us, we have Mikhail Garpunkel, who helped us recently by inviting a really strong expert from Japan, and we recently had this forum, a plus forum about circulation of cash, and that expert introduced us to the real situation in Japan. It's not a secret when everyone talks about how cash circulation is popular in Japan. And in the reports of the National Bank of Japan, they talk about 19%. But in reality, when we look deeper, we immediately understand that the real situation, since some of the circulation is cashless, it's actually at the level of 51%. And in Germany, the situation may be different. And many of you may know this topic already, and if there are answers, if there are questions, we will discuss them. Okay, anyway, let me give the floor to our first presenter, Alla Bakina. She has prepared an interesting presentation, and this is how it's going to look like. Who is going to win, hash or cash? Alla, you may have the floor. Thank you for giving me the floor. I wouldn't say it's a full-length presentation, and whether it's hash or cash, and these are not some kind of competing components of forces. These are two parts of one ecosystem that ensure payment or settlement system at a decent level. It's not one replacing or killing the other. The consumer should always have this choice. And a good example in this case is the cash-out service. It's cashless payments, giving the users this opportunity to have free access to cash. In Russia, we are running this pilot project together with a number of banks, and the global experience has shown some results. We looked at the global situation. It seems like when we give to the consumers a chance to get cash from post terminals or in stores when they need cash under certain conditions, how it impacts this ratio between cash and non-cash in different countries. And it was an additional incentive for the development of non-cash transactions. We have only started with our pilot. We'll look at the results here in Russia, but I don't think we'll have a different picture from that in Europe. Our ratio in Russia in retail is changing, and the consumer has the opportunity to use either tool depending on their consumer preferences. All these numbers are changing. As of the end of Q3, we're above 61%. By the end of the year, we'll reach 65% for non-cash payments. Is it a lot or not? We can look at similar numbers in other countries, or you can look at yourself. Let's say in 2014 we were at the level around 30%. We have grown twofold since that year, and so the rates are pretty good. Since I represent the regulator and some of my colleagues present here as well, they could confirm that the regulation that we're trying to use in this industry should be showing our balanced approach, so that there's no bias or tilt that would negatively impact our consumers. As the regulator, we need to keep a broad range of tools available for our consumers, for our users. We need to protect them from fraud, from the leak of personal data, and here our residents should be protected. There is no winner or loser in this game. It's a broad range of a variety of payment tools that we will make available to all our consumers, including ourselves. All right, thank you. Let's give our speakers a chance to present, and then we'll get back to the Q&A. All right. Then Oleg Krylov is next. I decided to look at this issue from a different perspective. I used to be involved in money transfers and translation also. What is hash? What is cash? Hash is about some unusual facts presented in different form. We all understand what cash is, and we need to speak about cash in a different language. And this is what I'm going to present to you. These are the global trends. This is the trend of M0 money aggregate. This is the cash that the population possesses. In Sweden, we have only 9.5 million people. In 2017, there was a U-turn. They began to print bills, and they have up of 6 billion in cash. And in Japan, almost 1 trillion. 6 times more than in Russia. In the UK, $102 billion owned by the population in cash.
And the next thing, which is a more interesting situation, these are the trends among the European countries in cash withdrawals from ATM machines. Let me see. So the wealthiest countries in Europe, they're withdrawing the most cash. Italians, Germans, and the French and the British are the most stable, and the Finnish and the Danish, they're reducing their withdrawals, and it tells us that the wealthiest countries in Europe, they're looking for protection from what is going on. And I'm really thankful to Mikhail Osiyevsky, who has already mentioned it, that in Europe we have negative interest rates, and the only secure protection for the wealthy is in cash withdrawal and storage cash. And as one of the largest transport company representative, I think this is the most sure way of protecting yourself. And how do we see ourselves as the money transmitters in Russia? We should pay attention to only a part of this slide, the last couple of images to the right bottom corner. It's the application of online encashment and electronic signature and biometric verification. We have over 18,000 points of withdrawal working with various banks, and we have an expert in the audience who will be speaking on this too. But as of today, the cash is involves a large industry with 100,000 people involved. And Arkady will probably talk about it, and Mr. Rolf, who is in the audience as well, and Gizik and Goznak are making the best bank bills in the world, and the latest technologies in making bank bills is they're very solid, and their quality is very high, and is only a few nanometers in thickness, but their recycling is a problem. And finally, Mr. Liskich 2 years ago was talking about new technologies in working with cash. And I can say firmly that not only the central bank today, but also major Russian banks possess the technology that really help us monitor the cash movement independent of the cash bills origin. And another problem that unfortunately has its place, it's another reason why cash is still popular in Japan, and why we will have the same thing here. That's why I included information on emergency situation year to date. And the climate is changing. We have a lot of problems even within Russia. In the Irkutsk region, for example, it has become a reason for investigation. And it was appointed to us that we should provide our citizens with cash money. It was on TV, and we should be able to look into the future with assuredness, and each of the fields will find their application in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Georgy. You know, I'm looking at the agenda. It's a new version of the agenda for today, and Vladimir Demidenko was supposed to speak on the cash system in Russia. Should we include Vladimir before you as a speaker, or yes? Thank you. What? Georgy, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
I was paying really close attention to our moderator's speech, and I'd like to note that besides the employees of the central bank and besides other banks, representatives in the audience, we have the industries representatives that Oleg mentioned. These are people who are making profit off of cash money circulation. I'd like to give you a figure that was mentioned. In the last 5 years, the overall turnover cash flow grew by 20%, and with the online and cashless payments growth, it's still statistical. And a few words on the help in Sweden that my colleague mentioned. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes. I also studied closely the Swedish experience, and since it's very cutting-edge discussion topic, and my colleague is a representative of the Association of Swedish Banks here mentioned that we don't foresee any cashless, like 100% cashless economy in Sweden in the foreseeable future. And the second thing is, according to the sociological study dedicated to the new bank bills cash flow circulation, the majority of the Swedish citizens responded that the design of the bank bills is a part of their national identity and pride. And their first bank bills appeared in 1661, and you know how much cash there is in circulation in Europe, and they still serve the society, and they play a very vital role, including the Russian Federation. And to talk about the decline or the total abrogation of use of cash, I think it's too early for that. And Oleg mentioned it, the example of emergency situations. Let me remind you of the catastrophe in Japan, at the atomic station in Fukushima. Then in Khabarovsk, there was a situation, emergency humanitarian catastrophe. There was a lot of cash poured into that region to provide for the retirement money. And the wear of the major assets is 65%, and the renewal rate is 5%. So we are foreseeing catastrophes in the future with a high level of probability. So the online banking, probably the cashless economy, is probably not the right answer for the moment. And the situation in Russia is matching the current state. So the manufacturers of equipment and manufacturers of bank bills, they of course stating the changes that are introduced in the economy. While I'm abroad in anywhere outside of Russia, I can actually top up my cell phone account in many ways. It's pretty easy. So the cash flow will probably be reduced in the future gradually, and the number of transactions done with the use of cash will also reduce. According to my forecast, we probably will reach the 80 to 90% of cashless transactions in a couple of maybe in a couple of decades fully, and because cash, of course, it involves other expenses and takes more time, and major factories and enterprises will probably finally stop using cash altogether. But the populace actually protested against switching towards the cashless economy fully, and they had to go back to cash acceptance. And in the Far East, there was an emergency situation, and it showed us clearly that for those situations, we need cash reserves. Yes, the transaction in cash the number of them will be reducing. What else will happen? The share of cashless transactions will grow, and cash transactions will no longer be profitable for major enterprises, but within the next 30 to 40 years, the cash will be gone altogether. But I think the horizon is further out there. If we take the situation in China, and I liked one of the comments when our colleagues from Turkey said that N0 in digital economy it is no longer cash economy, but I don't know where exactly he lives. But I'm sure that cash still is being used in Turkey, in other places, and all nations have all the reasons to be prideful of their bank bills historically. Thank you, Georgy. The next speaker on our agenda is Arkady. As far as I can understand, Arkady Trachuk, he will be talking about the changes in demand for production of paper cash. And if you don't have any objections, this will be a goodwill gesture from my part. Arkady, you're not only providing all of our country with cash money, but as far as I can understand, the Goznak actually manufactures up to 15% of paper cash bills in the world. What is going to change? Good afternoon, my colleagues. Of course, I was supposed, and I will talk about it, but for now, I have the impression that during this forum made me remember one of the old jokes about a patient who is being taken to a morgue, but he is still alive, and he is asking where they are taking him. They said, well, it's through the morgue that we're taking you, but he said, I'm not still dead, but we're not still there, was the response. And I would agree with my colleagues that we should look at this world with our eyes wide open, especially in Russia, in view of technologies of interaction and cashless payments, and expanding our services not only towards payment services proper, but also to contiguous spheres and areas. And in order to get to that zone and share of comfort that we all strive for, let me draw your attention to another arithmetics or statistics, because financial experts usually operate with nominal figures, and in that sense I'm operating with the hard figures, like the number of copies printed, and the figures are quite different. Let me go back to the Swedish example, where cashless society is predominant, and the cash transactions are a minority. And I don't know about the veracity of this figure, but the overall number of bank bills in paper is almost twice as little as in Russia. And in this context, we could look at what is being done in the world, and I'd like to note that by 3 to 5%, there is a number of growth of paper cash in the world, but there is a dynamics which is different. There are countries which witness the growth of cash, and Russia is one of them. We have over 6 billion bank bills in circulation, and this figure is stably growing, has been through in the last 5 to 7 years. But if you take the European countries as a whole, we see a high dynamics compared to other countries, and there are different reasons behind that. Maybe it's caused by the negative interest rate or other reasons. But if we talk about the global or Chinese demand, in the market, their cash circulation has dropped, and in our opinion, it's not justified as far as the payment services. If we take an upfront chance to answer this question, the dynamics probably will be changed only due to the situation where we have a real alternative with electronic money from the central bank.
That's going to be a great driver. It's going to change the payment landscape. It's a topic for a separate discussion, and Alla is a better expert on that than myself. So, you're done, right? Thank you. Next, let me give the floor to Alexey Ponomarenko. He is from the Cash Circulation Management Center of Sberbank. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. It would be logical for me as a representative of business to ask this question: what shall we do with the infrastructure in the market which is shrinking, and because infrastructure is quite expensive? Yesterday and today we keep asking the either-or question. We are asking either cash or non-cash. In the previous session, we were discussing cards or mobile payments. What will the consumer choose? I can tell you, as a consumer, to be honest with you, here's my phone. It's, of course, my favorite means of payment. I use it everywhere. It's convenient. But if I open it up, there are two parts here. I have a bit of cash here and my bank card. I need all three ways of payment. Some work better in certain situations. Sometimes the terminal or ATM doesn't work, or IT system doesn't work, and that's when you need cash as the last resort. And the consumer will be able to choose what they prefer. And based on my personal experience and my family, I can tell you that many consumers are like that. At the same time, the amount of cash is shrinking. But let's look at this from a broader perspective. We're talking about payments, and in retail, it is obvious. As a cash collection company, we face that issue. There's this, and there's this N0. If we look at it from the point of view of the number of banknotes in Russia, it's stable. It means that the cash is still here, and someone believes that this is necessary. And let me give you two numbers. The turnover of cash-based retail is slightly over 20 trillion rubles, but self-organizing turnover through the banks amounted to 43 trillion rubles. Another interesting amount, again, slightly over 60% of N0 aggregate is in the hands of the population. If you compare all these numbers, given the obvious development of cashless circulation, cash is still quite popular, because that's what the consumer tells us, that they need this money. In terms of infrastructure, it is costly to maintain this infrastructure with all this reduction of retail, but the issue is much broader. It's not just for banks and cash collection companies, but for regulators. Remember December 2014, there was a panic in the cash market when we issued the annual supply of cash. If we don't have the infrastructure to process these 60% of N0, then our economy will face the hard time, and that's what we need to consider together with our regulators. All right. Our next presenter is Alexander Agakov. QIWI used to make money when the money was transferred from cash to non-cash, and will you be able to take payment for that in 10 years, and how will the nature of the services change? I prepared a long presentation about all this, but then I listened to my colleagues who deal with cash, and I got a few ideas. Number one, within 10 to 15 years, or in the last 10 to 15 years that QIWI has been working, 12 years ago, 70% of cash to pay for phones went through QIWI terminals. 70% of all mobile operator payments in the entire country paid through our system for their phones. But today, it's only 5%. This number got reduced from 70 to 5%. Not because they abandoned cash. They still pay, but they use internet banks. My idea is this. In 10 or 15 years, we will never get to that small ratio of 1 or 5%. Infrastructure, Sweden is quite small, and there you can have ATMs everywhere, and you can cover, but try cover the entire country of Russia. And this person got a card from a yellow bank. Where would he put it in to buy some bread in some remote location? It's a tool of saving when your money is in the bank or at home. Now, remember our parents, and even now we still have some cash, and that's what our parents used to do, and that's what my mother is like even today. We need to invent for both the regulator and the population this idea how to save or store money in the non-cash form. When there's a security that could be turned into fiat money, you will wash out this money supply. But it means that you can reduce the money supply which is sitting in somebody's home idle or is being circulated elsewhere. And then it's how you preserve the funds of small companies. People, when they have 1,400,000, they divide this money between different banks because that amount is insured. And imagine a small entrepreneur with 10 million rubles. Sometimes bank gets shut down, and this person might lose the money, and they begin to come up with all these cash options. These three factors impact the money supply, the cash supply in operation. Now we have 61%, and then we go to 65% of cashless payments. Then two more examples of how we help turn cash into non-cash payments for B2B clients. There is scrap, metal scrap that people give to certain stations, and they get paid in cash. That's trillions of rubles. You cannot simply come there. They don't have cards. They just find that metal for scrap, and sometimes they use this kind of service. And we have Tochka Bank, which opens bank accounts for such entrepreneurs who collect this scrap, metal scrap from the population. And there's this entire system, transparent system. In the past, they had to use cash. They would get to some kind of dirty warehouse where they would use cash and use some paper record books. Now it's all transparent, who received the money, who delivered the scrap, and so on. And that increases the number of people who uses cashless payments. And taxi drivers, we all know big services, they aggregated cashless rubles for themselves, and the taxi companies would go to banks to try to cash it, and the banks wouldn't believe them. And we organize it in such a way that to send the money that come from aggregators to cabs, to cab drivers, and it's up to them how they're going to pay their taxes. We believe they will be honest, and will also help them to become self-employed. These services show us that when banks hesitate about some cash-based operations, we turn that cash into real, honest, trustworthy money. In conclusion, let me say that the money circulation, whether it's hash or cash, it doesn't matter whether it's not that simple. You cannot have 100% cashless situation. It's a market. It will regulate itself. You need to understand why people use cash or non-cash payments in certain situations. So let's offer our residents some excellent tools to make money on investments with good liquidity. Let's work on infrastructure, and then we'll have no problem. People will be paying by what they find convenient anywhere, even if through terminals. All right. All right. Thank you. We wanted to ask Alla, Bakina about what is the advantage of the non-cash society. The presenters were all quite logical, and there's no contradiction there. All their ideas mean pretty much the same thing. There are many advantages there, and we need to look at the simplicity, accessibility, affordability, mobility, and all these advantages. For business, it's not up to the regulator to invent those business models. The market understands that better, and giving them some better chances. For commercial companies, for banks, it speeds up their payments. It's the profitability that they find in different business models. And for the government, it's quite obvious. It's transparency, it's reducing risks, it's transparency of flows, not to mention such topics as taxation and all other good things. It's obvious. The advantages of cashless payments are obvious, I think. Thank you. No one argues with me that a word is something intangible, but this Russian poet of the 19th century, Fyodor Tyutchev, once wrote, "We can never predict the results that our words will lead to." And let's see if our speakers were able to predict the future of non-cash circulation. I omitted one very important point. I want people who make decisions in the Bank of Russia to hear these words. Since 2014, the number of payment and cash centers decreased manifold. We have a new model of organizing the cash circulation. It's not being discussed. According to my information, I believe that the Bank of Russia now began to discuss the future strategy, and we have implemented 2 strategies already. And we really want business at an early stage to participate in the discussion of cash circulation. For them, it's predictability, it's building business models, and I think this is something really necessary. And that was a good statement, because if you know what our Plus forums are all about, and most of our speakers are aware of our conferences, and I will give you the floor at the end. That will be my second attempt.
Don't think that I'm trying to pay you off. And this specific issue was the center of many presentations and speeches during this forum. And you're absolutely right. It's our business. Thank you. Let me give the floor to Vladimir Demidenko. Cash in Russia is no longer king. What cash what kind of a role it will play in Russia, and what will be the trends and changes? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Just a few questions, a few points on two issues. The first is the global picture, the big picture, and what to do. The sociological studies, there are shows that there are three categories of people. The first one is cash ready, who are ready to live both cash and cashless economies at the same time. Secondly, it's the category that already believes that they are a part of the cashless society. And the third category is not cashless ready at all, and they will not and could not go there in that direction. We should probably work harder with that category of people in order to influence them, and because they will, of course, assist or be an obstacle in this, in the implementation of the global trend. And there is a assuredness that we can, of course, use this category. Which will be very sensitive to the changes. And there is another category, which is another thing that I would like to talk about is the transparency. And the existing technologies already allow us to use it and achieve the transparency in cash circulation, and we should probably look for drivers to stimulate cashless transactions. What's going on right now? What should the goals be? Business has already begun the transformation of the model of cash circulation and money circulation and there has been discussions among the central bank and among the retail organizations and payment services. We already implement such projects as the white ATM, white payments processing centers. And there was an interesting colleague from Holland who told us that about 25% of the expenditures or costs were achieved in economy by using new ways, and there is also various ways of marketplaces, and we have been developing those marketplaces with loan organizations, and these are the main trends that I see. Thank you, Vladimir. I am not aware about everybody else, what exactly will be the steps to implement the new changes, the new transformations in the cashless or cash flow in his country and abroad. And furthermore, let me give the floor to Elena Tishko. And we hope that her intervention and presentation will be very substantial. And what are the preferences for payments among the customers and what we should be ready for? Dear participants, dear delegates, good afternoon. My company's example confirms the 10 trends that have been mentioned by the speakers. As of today, over 70% of the orders that are applied for on Ozone are paid by the online card. It's a prepaid order category. Besides that, a part of the orders are being paid at the point of delivery. And altogether, post-payment and the prepayment in cashless mode, it takes up to 92%, and the remaining share of 8% is cash payments. And a year ago, the statistics were that the cashless payments were 80% and the cash payments were 15%. So the trend is towards the reduction of the cash payments, in spite of the fact that the cash payments are reducing in their share. The absolute figures are that this amount in absolute figures is not being reduced. And that's why we are taking measures to automate this process and to increase the technological component of the cash flow and the money flow. On the other hand, we are developing an FPS, the faster payments system, along with the central bank and with SPK. We work together on offering new technological solutions for our clients who pay for their orders online, being at 70% of the overall number of orders. And we have already have good results, success in QR code linked payments, or at delivery points, or courier's delivery. Among our online clients, there will be a subscription mode that will be as comfortable or easy to use to the clients as possible. So thus, for the moment, we have two ways of payments, one of which is prevailing. It's cashless payments with 92% of its share, and in the future, we foresee a subscription solution for online clients and cash payments. We suggest we offer these ways of payments to our customers, and they will be making the choice, and we like to give them the choice and thus foreseeing and predicting their expectations. And we are ready for developing of various scenarios in payment services. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. The next question is referred to Mr. Ralph Litzke.
Thank you. Russian, because I heard that you at least understand Russian. Отлично. Thank you.
I think that in this respect, more or less, have been happy because my son-in-law, my daughter-in-law is of German origin, and she could serve as a good translator. Nonetheless, it is a well-known fact that the company that you represent is one of the major manufacturers of bank bills, and it also plays a very significant part in the cash or cashless payment services. What kind of changes do you foresee in the future?
Hello? No, it's following. 2 years ago, I was sitting here as well, and I was talking totally against the non-cash payment. But unfortunately, I have to correct myself because we are operating worldwide. And what we really notice is that the share of payment, non-cash payment, is increasing by 12% in an average. In emerging Asia, this is India, China, and Hong Kong, is by 32%. In Central Europe and Middle East Africa is by 19%. And this was from 16 to 17. 18 and 19, these numbers are even higher. this is the trend. We have to see it. And we as GIZIGE, we understand this as well, and we react. On one hand, of course, we continue with our core business. This is banknote printing. The banknote printing, our books are still full, like yours as well. And with banknote processing, with a focus on automatization. But we have strategic search fields which based on digitalization. And this we are doing by own innovations and by purchasing and acquisition. But the main thing is we understand the trend and we focus on digitalization as well. Not like 2 years ago, as I said, not with us. But it's the case. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Thank you.
The next speaker will be a short one, but nonetheless interesting one, from Mikhail Garfunkel. Japan is a country of innovations, and on the other hand, it's a fortress, it's a citadel of cash production. Are there any cracks in the wall of that fortress? And what are the trends in Japan? Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. I will probably answer in Russian, and I will abstain from speaking Japanese. Well, answering the question briefly, yes, the fortress, a citadel of cash economy circulation, there is still there. And in Japan, there is no sharp contrast between cash or cashless. And Japan is a country of harmony. And these parts of the economy are considered to be vital and necessary for the economy. And cash is a vital part of the digital economy, and the ratio between cash and cashless transactions is 50-50, and the representatives of the Japanese government never even talk about the abolishing cash circulation. And all of the speakers here noted that these factors also are present in our country, because for the socially unfavorable categories of people, they still need cash reserves, and from the majority of the population is still doesn't have any access to online or cashless services. Japan, being a very vulnerable in terms of environment and natural catastrophes. And Japanese know that reality full well, and that's why Japan uses their means of protection in the volume and turnover of the cash to the GDP is one of the top countries in the world. The volume of the banknotes is regularly growing. There are slight changes in the numbers of coins, and the low value coins are getting out or taken out of the circulation eventually. And the higher value coins are growing in number. But on the other hand, there is a question of improving the technology of cash circulation quality, and Japan is ahead of automation, the rest of the world, by 20 to 30% ahead of the rest of the civilized world. And in conclusion, I'd like to state that all technologies are being implemented, and our company is introducing the anthropomorphic robots in the cash processing. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, dear colleagues. Among our experts, we have Sergei Barsukov, whom I will give a floor for a couple of minutes. So we managed to actually stay within our time frame, and we have been galloping as sort of. But I have a suggestion to all our speakers and experts. After Sergei is done speaking, let us give a short answer to a simple question: how do we see the situation with cashless and cash involved circulation in a matter of the next few years? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And we, as a company, we specialized more in reducing retail expenditures in cash circulation. It's about expedition services, and I'd like to share that we already have a very big experience in working together with Gazprombank and other banks and using devices. And this process of automation gives us an opportunity to reduce the number of physical trips. And at the same time, the retailers, they have an extra tariff. It's a mobilization money, so-called mobilization money, which, in our opinion, and in the opinion of many participants, is not a real thing. We have to pay extra, and we are looking for some assistance from our mega regulator in terms of pilot projects. Please, this funding, extra funding, is about 30%. And among the banks, it comes to more sensitive numbers, up to 25 billion, for example, per year. At the same time, there is a reverse process.
The cost of transfer and calculation, in other words, when the cash encashment armored vehicle with 2 armed guards gets 500 rubles, and for a taxi you pay 500 rubles, it's not enough. We need this reserve that will allow us to do this kind of upgrade and reducing the tariffs for retail. This could be given to upgrade the fleet of cash encashment, cash collection vehicles. And here's what I feel. The market is changing from the point of view of those who are part of this market, manufacturers of vehicles and providers of services and banks. We need to consolidate and redistribute the roles, because there's this obvious tilt, you know, where in some capacities are overloaded and elsewhere they're idle, and some major players may go bankrupt, and eventually the cash collection services will become even more expensive. I would vote for redistributing these roles in a different way, so that cash processing for retailers and private individuals would become cheaper. I may have sounded chaotic, but I was trying to fit within the 2 minutes left. All right, as I promised, we saved some time, and let's use it and give the floor to Alla. What's going to happen to cash, non-cash payments in about 10 years? This year, everyone is trying to give predictions for 10 years based on the current trend for the development of non-cash transactions, how the technologies are developing, and based on the cumulative effect from that, we have pretty good chances to reach the level of 78% for non-cash transactions. Then Mr. Krylov. I wanted to make a joke, going back to where we started. In 10 years, all banks present here that issue plastic cards, they mentioned that a dozen times during the day. It's advertisement, and this word is cash back. Cash will be back. Cashback is when cash is back. That's what we mean by it. Thank you. And this was a kind of a joke. We all got you. All right. Mr. Trachuk, 4 key points from me. The cash will remain the reliable means of payment in terms of comfort and trust from the population. All the creative ideas will be in non-cash area. It will be easier for us. It will still be there will be convenient channels of switching between cash, non-cash. There will be more such channels. They will be diverse. That's one of the services, is going to be one of the services offered by financial institutions. Operational efficiency for institutions that will work with cash. And this is what we will need to do together with banks and regulators, and convenience of users is our 4th point. The Bank of Russia is ahead of us. They have this unique application, actual physical bills of the Bank of Russia that give us all the convenience, and we can always test if they are forged or not. And I'm not going to diminish the role of non-cash payments at the same time. I really enjoyed the phrase of my colleague from QIWI, who said that we turn cash into normal money. That's how he put it. The cash is the only normal money issued by the state. They will be normal, will stay normal. And the ratio can be different. I quoted 85%, but what do you mean here? Number of transactions, number of money in the circulation. The overall money supply of cash will probably not be reduced, but in transactions, non-cash transactions will dominate. Alexey Ponomarenko. We witness a natural shrinking of our volume of business. Cash generates lots of costs for all the players and for the government. It's a good background to use cutting-edge solutions. We'll become one of the most active users. We are talking about robotics and AI that helps us run this huge fleet of ATMs. We'll keep looking for solutions to reduce the costs for all players. At the same time, we need the industry to stay alert and alive to respond to any of the challenges coming from any side. Alexander. We service all transactions, cash and non-cash. This contest of predictions, I'm not going to argue with the regulator. 78% is a good number. But it's all about the quality of those transactions. In 10 or 15 years, the GDP will grow quite significantly. It means that the supply of cash will also be growing, and for that you will need infrastructure and technologies. And it's true, most of the problems are in the area of how efficiently we will reduce the cost of using these tools of payment. Vladimir Demidenko. The biggest danger for cash is availability. We need to keep that choice for the consumer. We shouldn't lose it. The cycle itself will become more efficient. I think we will reduce the costs of cash circulation. Elena Tishko. As a representative of e-commerce, let me say this. E-commerce is a fast-growing market. Based on the data of 2018, Ozon is the fastest-growing company in the market. I already gave you some statistics. 92% of non-cash payments. Is there a room to grow? You might ask, but for us, we care about the client experience. It has to be as comfortable and convenient as possible, and of course, reliable. We work on building an ecosystem that offers our clients a full range of financial services. And for that, we need different scenarios of payment systems and faster payment system for the solution for our online users who prefer prepayment on our website. Rolf?
As I said before, we understand the trend. We continue with our current core business, don't worry about that. But as well, we defined new search fields, digital solution. This is for the payment, this is for money, digital money. This is security, Internet of Things, and something like this.
Thank you. Спасибо.
I sort of represent Japan here. In Japan, cash will be used forever. And in Japan, there are many popular channels of immediate transfer between cash and non-cash. That is what's special about the payment system of Japan. If you're interested in details, talk to me individually. I don't want to promote our company, but we recently had a forum in the beginning of October. If you're interested, I can give you the presentation or the contact data. It's in Japan and also in Japanese and also in good Russian. And Sergei Barsukov is the last one to speak. My predictions are that 25% will be cash, the rest non-cash, but there will be more bills compared with what we have today. Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for the interest that you have shown to our speakers and experts. I believe you found that interesting, and see you later. Thank you again.